Hello and welcome. Today I'm talking to Monique Sherrett, who has a really extensive and interesting background in publishing and in marketing and publishing. So maybe I'll let you summarize your experience for us.
Sure. So again, my name is Monique. I run this marketing consultancy called Boxcar Marketing, and I work primarily with publishers and other arts and media organizations to basically help them understand what aspects of their marketing are working, what's not working, and how to optimize their campaigns. So it's a real mix of strategy and tactical execution with a ton of data analytics to really understand what's happening through that customer journey and how to help publishers really think about that marketing mix for each title or author.
Terrific. And maybe you could name some books you've worked on previously or some authors you worked with.
Sure. Yeah. Well, the humble brag is 10 years of Harry Potter marketing. So I worked on that series with Raincoast Books, who is the Canadian publisher, and then interacted with the international publishers and the author's agent and the various fan and community sites built around that. I did a 3-part podcast series with Anthony Bourdain, where we followed him around for a day while he was on tour here in Vancouver. And I, of course, have worked with most of the independent publishers across Canada and their various literary and trade organizations.
Terrific. Thank you. So today's topic is digital advertising and how it relates to publishers. Yes, indeed. And so just, broadly speaking at a high level, as we know, there are two globally, or in North America, there are the two big players of Google and Facebook. And then the third, a little more detail. But sure. When you talk to publishers about their kind of digital advertising mix, that is to say, where they spend their time and money, do they tend to emphasize one of these three platforms? Are there other platforms they're concerned with? Are there ones that you think maybe they overlook?
Yes, to all of those questions. So at a really high level, publishers are always trying to have a marketing mix that addresses their trade audience as well as the consumer audience. So the trade audience is really about how they sell into the stores. So it's marketing that they do with book publishers or media or various industry influencers. And then the direct to consumer stuff would be more what I think most people think of when they're thinking about the digital ad mix. With do you do social media ads on Instagram or YouTube video ads or search marketing? So I'd say, depending on the publisher, 20 to 40% of that total marketing budget is going to be directly related to that consumer marketing, which most students would be familiar with, the kind of ads that they see. And so that's going to be a mix of display ads that you might do with various publications. So if someone's a big reader of the Tyee and they're into social justice titles, then a publisher like New Society Press might do display ads or sponsored content in a publication like the Tyee, and then also run some Facebook or Instagram ads that have an audience target around those various interests. But kind of across the board, I'd say the social media ads are pretty easy to run. So a lot of publishers will gravitate towards Facebook ads and Instagram ads, Facebook owning Instagram. So you set up the account within the same space. Very few do Google search and display ads. However, the exception would be if you have a nonfiction title where there's a very large niche audience. So if you have a book for knitters, then you could do display ads through the Google Display Network that appear on those knitting community sites. If you have a really hot political title and there's a lot of news activity around something, so any of the Trump books or anti-Trump books, then Google search ads makes a lot of sense where you have high search activity. And then the Amazon ads really come into play if you, this is maybe the missed opportunity, is the Amazon ads, you have two different ways to market. So there's the lock screen ads and the sponsored, what do they call them? Sponsored products, product sponsors. And you bid on a keyword or a series of keywords in order to have your book show up in that section below. When someone searches for a title, they'll see the sponsored products below those search results. So that's kind of, I think, a missed opportunity would be the Amazon ads. The Goodreads giveaway campaigns are another paid advertising opportunity for publishers to get an early audience for a book. That works really well if you have a certain genre books work well. So true crime, fantasy, mystery, anything that you could properly label or find in a bookstore as a category can work well on Goodreads, often fiction-based. And podcast sponsorships, I'd say, would be the other thing.
Can you just say what Goodreads is?
Goodreads is a website owned by Amazon, not clearly labeled as owned by Amazon, but it's owned by Amazon, and it's all user-generated content. So people who read a book will write a review, they'll add certain titles to their shelf, they'll create lists, so top cyberpunk must-read titles. So they come up with different lists, and there's a community aspect to it where you can build up a fan or follower base. Authors, especially self-published authors, have some great success building up an audience there. And then as a publisher or as a self-published author, you can run various campaigns or contests that help people read your book or get access to early copies of your book before it's published, in order to nudge those reviews, which are really helpful for generating word of mouth and new discovery of titles.
Yeah, I'm not a heavy Goodreads user, but I have used it, and I have received those promotional emails essentially. Oh, you liked Gone Girl. I think you might like this book. Would you like a preview of it? That sort of thing.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And sorry, I just wanted to go back quickly to the number you said at the start of your answer there, which it sounded like less than half of all digital advertising is kind of consumer targeted.
I mean, yes, because I think about advertising as any type of paid campaign that you might do. And so for publishers, traditionally, their role was to engage with the trade audience, with the industry or B2B, business to business side of things. And so you have sell in and sell through. You sell into the trade and you sell through to consumers. And discoverability for books in particular in Canada, and also sales of books, your primary channels are still bookstores and libraries. Online retailers, word of mouth are the top kind of 3 or 4. So for a publisher, especially if you have a smaller budget, you want to find those not one-off individual customers or readers for your book. You want to find the people who can really tap into a larger audience. So a niche retailer like Vancouver Kids Books can do really great things promoting your title, and you do different partnerships or paid advertising with them in order to appear in an email newsletter that they send out to their customer base. Or you might work specifically if you have a festival author, so a lot of fiction authors that are media friendly and work well on a panel, get picked up by festivals. And so you might, with limited funds, rely on whatever kind of marketing you can do to integrate with the festival. So you might do a display ad that appears on the festival website or in some type of newsletter, as well as in their printed program. So you're often trying to find a way to do an integrated marketing campaign that isn't just solely digital. But even in the case of digital, you're often trying to think about what you can bundle effectively. So some publications, like Geist magazine, for example, if you have a very literary focused book, then an ad bundle that Geist might offer you is a digital ad that appears on their website, a mention in their email newsletter, and 3 or 4 kind of sponsored posts or promoted posts that they do within their social media platforms.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. So I want to jump into, I guess one thing that I'm hearing a little bit, or which certainly I already know as somebody who's published a book myself, but, publishers have a humble amount of money per book to promote most 98% of books, right? And so how do you help them decide how to spend that? You've kind of already answered that question, I guess, in part, but I don't know if you want to speak any more to that or just talk about how little money there is per book. Not for Harry Potter, but the vast majority of other books, right?
Sure. Well, the math component is separate from the how do you decide component. So the math component of it is that each book has a profit and loss statement, and there is a percentage of the anticipated net sales that a publisher allocates towards marketing that title. So it'll be anywhere from 5 to 10% of what they anticipate earning. Mm-hmm. And the thing with books is that publishers earn maybe 40% of whatever the list price is. So how much you as a shopper would pay for a book, maybe 40% of that goes to the publisher. So this is why we have small marketing budgets, because you have 5 to 10% of all the money you think you're going to earn for that title, and you need to divide that small pool of money between your trade audience and your consumer audience. The question about this consumer amount of money that you have to do digital ads, whether that's Google search, Amazon, social media ads, other display ads, email marketing ads, sponsored podcasts, all that kind of stuff. What you're really trying to do is think about the intended audience for that book and where is your best opportunity to reach as many of them as possible in channels that have high engagement, where you can spend that budget effectively in order to have enough frequency. So you're thinking about reach and frequency and engagement. So for example, lots of English language publishers in Canada are huge fans of Twitter. Yes. So Twitter is okay in terms of reach if you're going to do a digital ad where you're targeting an event hashtag, for example. So when Comic-Cons happen and you've got large groups of people who are attending an event and they're using a particular hashtag, whether that's Twitter or Instagram, if you can create a campaign that's around an event, then it might be worthwhile if you have an author that's attending that Comic-Con to advertise in those 2 channels where you can capitalize on use of a hashtag. If it's a title like Tessa and Scott is a large format photography book of Canada's skating wonder duo. So you could do a job in that case with a finite budget to do Facebook ads that are targeting people who like reading and skating, or people who attend the various skating competitions or follow those types of pages, or even do remarketing campaigns through Facebook or Google if people have come to your website to look at that book already or to look at blog content related to that title, then show them the ad. So it's totally dependent on the publisher, and more important, each title, who that intended audience is and where that audience actually hangs out online.
Thank you for that. I was just doing some quick math with your numbers while that happened. So let's imagine a book that sells 5,000 copies in Canada, which is a lot, right?
Yes.
That's like well above average.
For a fiction title, yes.
Yeah, a novel. Let's imagine a novel.
Sure.
And so
not by Margaret Atwood.
Not by Margaret Atwood. And so it's priced, just for ease of calculation, it's priced at $20.
Sure.
And so 5,000 copies. So we've made $40,000 from that book.
Yep.
We've made $40,000. The publishers made $40,000 because they get 40% of the list price of $20. So that's $8. So that's $40,000. Bear with me.
Yes, I'm following.
My math is, so publishers got $40,000, and then they can spend, as you say, 5 to 10% of that on marketing. So let's be generous and say it's 10%. So that's $4,000 they have to promote this book. But as you say, that's divided between trades and B2C, B2B and B2C to consumer. So basically they might have $2,000 to spend entirely on marketing for this book, if they anticipate correctly that this book is going to sell very well in Canada as a novel.
Yes.
So that's, and $2,000 just for students is a very humble marketing budget in the world of marketing, right? Like $2,000 doesn't get you very far.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you might only have $500.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's a good selling a novel that sells well, right? But if we divided those numbers by 5 or by 4, and we anticipate the novel sells 1,200 copies, then it's $500. Yeah.
Yes. So that all of that math goes on behind the scenes. And if you are me as an agency helping someone spend that budget, or if you are internally working in the marketing department, then often you're given a set amount. Mm-hmm. And if you're successful with that, then usually the purse strings can loosen up a bit. So the other calculation is the return on ad spend. You'll often look at how much money are you going to spend on the ads, and do you see that returned in terms of sales? And with digital ads, on the one hand, we can easily track that because the metrics happily show us a conversion or a purchase. Except the challenge in books is a bit of an attribution problem, because often what you'll do is a campaign that is in partnership with a retailer. So you might run your Facebook ads, but drive that traffic to Indigo. Or you might run the ad and not necessarily send someone to your own publisher e-commerce store. You send them in store, like you're trying to drive traffic in store. So then you're looking at your BookNet Canada sales data, which is the research that does all the point of sale purchase data across Canada. So you're looking to see whether all of your marketing created any type of lift over that week, but you can't necessarily track back to, it was this $500 Instagram ad or campaign that we did.
Yeah, it is the usual advertising problem in this sense of like, you often need to spend money on awareness, and sometimes called consideration, those early 2 parts. You're not going to spend all your money just being like, buy this book to drive that sale, right? Because you might spend money promoting an author's appearance somewhere, and they get in front of 50 people, and maybe they sell 20 books at that event. But attributing the spend back to your ad would be challenging.
Yes. And so this is a great example of one of the things I think publishers overlook, where they will do some marketing in advance of the publication of the book to generate awareness and excitement for the author and the title, and to get pre-orders, which are good market signal that something is going to take off. And then they do the majority of their advertising around getting people out to events or going in store to purchase. And one of the if you have a small budget and you have an author who's doing an event, have an event hashtag, create an ad campaign around the event. You might have limited seating for that event, but do a campaign after the event that pulls on those heartstrings of like, I missed out, but you can still buy the book, or you can still follow the author, or you can still sign up for this email newsletter. Like, I think some of that, how these things work together as a bit of an ecosystem, sometimes gets missed, and it's one-off, run an ad, see if it works, rather than thinking about how can you integrate as many pieces of this puzzle as possible.
And often this is true, that ecosystem doesn't work well together is true in any industry, I find. And I find it has to do with like assumptions or historical behavior or where departments sit, that like, well, we're the event department and we're the digital department and we don't talk to each other as well as we could or something like that, right?
Yeah.
But I do find that quite common. Let's shift gears slightly and get into the weeds of advertising a little bit. I would like to talk about ad creative. And just when I say creative, for folks who may not know, creative is just a generic term for the aesthetic aspects and design of an ad, right? So when the ad industry talks about creative to separate it from the kind of delivery mechanism, whether that's the bus shelter real world display ad or a digital ad on Instagram. But the creative just refers to what the ad looks like and what it says, the words and the pictures, basically. And so, I imagine you have made your fair share of ads that are a picture of a book or a close-up of part of the book cover. And I was just curious to hear from you a little bit about how you think of creative when marketing books and maybe things like podcasts too, other media. And, do you have any best practices or things you do or things you avoid or, like, for example, I'll just give you a quick example. My baseline is always a picture of a person. I always try for digital ads, a picture of a person or a group of people, and then everything else gets tested against that because my experience is pictures of people work best. And so, but I always want to test that assumption. So I try other things. So I wonder if you have assumptions or baselines you start with.
Yes. So typically ads related to books will show the cover or some aspect of the cover because this is the thing that you have spent the most work on in terms of branding. Mm-hmm. The cover design involves all of that audience research about how people do, in fact, judge a book by its cover. And so the cover has to attract the intended audience for the book. So you want to use aspects of the cover, if not the full cover, in your ad. And a book cover, if you look closely at it, is actually quite busy because you have the title, you have the author name, you have an image in the background. You often have quotes on the cover that help get people to turn over the back of the physical book or to scroll down in a book detail page to read more. So in an ad, a best practice would be to remove some of that busyness from the cover because you have to assume, especially if you're doing social media ads, that people are going to view that on a mobile device. So creating a cover that is a bit more low fidelity, less busy that you use in the ad is a good thing. Often you'll see a cover image with a background. So a lot of books, unless you're talking about picture books or children's books, are in a portrait format instead of a landscape format. But most of the ads we create are in that landscape format. So you have your book, but what's going on in the background? Often you'll use some visual element from the cover of the book. So you'll use a color or a pattern or something else that is working, or you'll create kind of that mock cover image that shows some of the illustration, but then you use your quote or blurb from the cover as the text on the ad. So there's a good reason for focusing on the cover of a book because that is the thing that people recognize when they go into a store or when they search on Amazon or somewhere else. Like, oh yes, this is the book that I want because that's the packaging. So pulling that cover into an ad is important in some way. The other element of the creative that I think is where publishers go astray is just not really understanding how to write effective copy for the ad. So if you're running search ads, for example, then you want to be really thinking about what are the keywords that someone's going to be searching? How would they be describing this book? Like inspirational graduation gift. You want to be using those keywords that are the benefit or the value or the thing that someone wants out of that book in order to attract attention.
Mm-hmm.
The same is the case if you're doing a display ad where you have the bit of text that you can put underneath that cover image. It's in fiction, you're trying to answer, what is this? Who is it for? So what? Is it noteworthy? Is it an award winner? Is it tapping into something that is trending? And if it is a nonfiction book, then you're trying to use that copy to really reinforce the reputation of the author and why they are worth listening to on this particular topic. And so the copy is often, they do a good job with the visual aspects of the creative, but then the copy feels a bit generic or doesn't have a call to action or doesn't really get to that so what aspect of why should I spend money on this or why should I go further? And you asked me about video. I mean, static text ads are certainly one of the things that I would A/B test. So I'll often look at, I'll test the headline of an ad. You were mentioning people in the ad. Often you'll see a lifestyle or aspirational ad where it's a person in a lovely secluded spot reading their book. At no point do you see their children or the dog in the background disturbing their beautiful reading experience. So you'll certainly see that kind of aspirational or lifestyle or kind of like product placement style of ad. But the video ads get a lot more attention often. So testing a static ad versus a video ad. And a video ad doesn't have to be the super high quality ad. It could be something where you have a very beautiful cover design where aspects of the cover elements move. Like it's just sort of interactive or there's some motion that helps tell that story or grab people's attention when they're scrolling through that social media feed.
Yeah, I would say one thing that's changed, we've been working in the industry, marketing for a long time, but we've had staff and contractors just make quite impressively sophisticated animated video stuff, Giphy, but like 15 or 20 seconds long, like a GIF, but longer, or whatever a GIF is now. But just using Canva, just like using a free tool that has animated aspects, and you don't need to be an animator. You don't have to use Adobe After Effects or whatever, all the Adobe suite. You can make something that like is eye-catching and looks professional, and things swish around and move in and out really easily now. And I agree, we do find that video, generally speaking, outperforms the static version of something. On a related note to video, I wanted to ask about book trailers. I know they have been a thing. Are they still as much of a thing? Are they still something that the publishers focus on or care about?
Yes, no. I think the book trailer, the way that publishers started to use that was trying to mimic a movie trailer. So The Book Thief is a good example, a title a couple of years ago where the trailer was very cinematic and super engaging. And it was that kind of page turner type of book. The production quality for that kind of book trailer is just so prohibitive for most titles. So the kind of book trailer that I think is still effective is the kind of trailers that you see for nonfiction titles. So Leela Fever's book, Big Enough, has an explainer video about the book. That's a good example of a nonfiction author talking about their book and introducing themselves and establishing their expertise. So that kind of trailer or introduction works well. In fiction, Bloomsbury Publishing in the UK had a title, something with the word curse in it. I'm just forgetting at the moment. But what they did, instead of featuring the author, was they did this sort of animated introduction slide where pieces of the cover revealed themselves. But then the video in the ad, the video component of the ad were various bookstagrammers and booktubers and like the influencers within the sort of consumer side of the book market who were talking about what they loved about the title or what the author was doing. And it was just short, fast clips, the kind of way that you would have on a movie poster, like brilliant, exceeds expectations. But a little bit more fleshed out about what to expect from the read. And so, that as a trailer was a really interesting way to create excitement or interest in a title. But that kind of cinematic book trailer, I think, has left us.
Okay. And I think maybe for a last topic, I'd just like to talk a bit more about Amazon, in part because of personal interest, because I've never run ads on Amazon. I don't know a lot about it, but the numbers, recent numbers I could find were that basically in North America, 60% of the ad market is Facebook and Google. And then Amazon is the next biggest slice of that pie at about 8%. And then there's the rest of the other 30% of the digital ad market is essentially other, right? But obviously, or to me at least, I would imagine that Amazon has a outsized importance to publishers. And so I don't know if you have any more thoughts on Amazon advertising or how you've seen it evolved or what your best practices are on it.
Amazon's really pushing publishers to try out their ad platform. And the biggest pro for Amazon ads is that people go to Amazon and search with higher purchase intent than they would do if they were searching on Google or following a hashtag or looking at a sponsored post in social media. So in general, if someone is searching on Amazon, they've got higher purchase intent. So it makes sense to show up in the results on Amazon, especially if your goal is to sell copies of a book. The tricky part for Amazon is a really important retailer in the US and is increasing in its importance in Canada. But and the percentage of sales that you have through Amazon is going to vary by publisher. But if we just use an educated guess and say maybe Amazon is 15 to 20% of the market, 15 to 20% of books sold in Canada go through Amazon. In the US, it's much higher. Like that could be 70 or 80%. So if you are selling books in the US, Amazon is a really important retail channel. It makes a lot more sense to run ads off of Amazon than it would, say, Facebook. But it's one of those elements to consider as part of your mix. And you have two opportunities within Amazon. You have these sponsored products where you're bidding on a keyword, like 200 to 1,000 keywords. And those keywords are related to things like the title of your book, the author, the category or things that people might type in when they're searching. If I like cyberpunk, sci-fi, military, I might type in cyberpunk military in order to see what titles show up there. The biggest opportunity or way that publishers use Amazon is often for product research or to understand what are the comp titles, what are the comparative titles in a particular category. So if I'm writing a book on knitting that takes people beyond the simple scarf, then I'm going to do some research on Amazon to see what shows up for knitting book, what shows up for beginner knitting book, what shows up for knitting book, scarf or sweater or whatever I think is the progression from a scarf. So those kind of keyword phrases that people use, you would add that to your list of 200, 300 keywords that you're going to bid on. But simultaneously, those titles that show up in your search results for those very books, you can bid on those competitor titles and author names. So that's a real advantage for Amazon ads versus Google ads, where you typically, you can't bid on a competitor name. So the Amazon ads are helpful if you have someone on your team or hire a consultant who's really good at doing that kind of research, because the Amazon recommendation is you want to have 200 to 300 keywords that you're bidding on. Mm-hmm. And you want to group those keywords the same way that you would in Google search ads by kind of a topic or search intent, like someone searching for beginner book knitters versus knitting patterns versus something else. So that again, in the copy, in the creative of your ad, you're going to use the keywords that are related to that kind of way that you've grouped the keywords. Mm. So there's a lot of setup to do the Amazon ads really well. And you want to have a fairly healthy bid strategy, because most people are not quite sure what they're doing. And so they either bid too high or they bid too low. So it's a pretty important platform, I would say, if you were trying to sell and market titles to a US audience and have the capacity to do that kind of research that you need to do in order to effectively advertise in that channel.
Are there, as in Google, as you know, there's like a keyword research tool, and then there's third-party tools you can free or you can pay for. Is there a similar tool in Amazon?
Yes, there are a couple of them. One of the best ones is Publisher Rocket. So you enter your phrase and it goes and scrapes all the titles that show up for that search results. Their ASIN, which is your Amazon standard identification number. And then it also goes and pulls all the titles that show up if you were to go to each of those books individually to see what the related titles are.
All right. Okay.
So yes, you can do some fairly quick scraping using that paid tool. And it's something like $97 US. Like, it's not a huge amount. And then you would export your list into Google Sheet or Excel or something in order to do that extra step of grouping and thinking about search intent and how you want to create your ads based off of groups.
I feel like this is the most commonly overlooked part for like maybe smaller businesses or small publishers or individuals, that doing the research, you can learn so much about like what your competition is doing, what's working for them, what's not working for them across these platforms, using tools like this, using the Facebook ad library, using like audience insights on Facebook, all these various tools. You can just do so much research that can inform, particularly if you're new to the sector, or you're maybe you're a self-published author, you're not a marketer. You can do so much to help you make wise choices, smart choices, and save money or spend your money effectively, expeditiously.
Yeah.
Terrific.
I'm a fan of that Facebook audience insights tool, especially if you're doing your Facebook and Instagram ads in order to figure out the audience demographics or other interests, and looking at what other pages that audience likes or follows, then there's a ton of marketing opportunities off of that. So I had a bunch of graphic novels, animated titles, and we were looking at the French market, and people in that market who were liking these particular kinds of animated series and anime also like Japan Expo. So it was like, oh, well, here's a conference to attend, or look at Japan Expo. Who else is following Japan Expo, or what does that audience look like? So you can certainly go down the rabbit hole, but then you can also learn a ton about your audience and what they like and where they live and what kind of interest they have, to really think about, then I use the Facebook ads library to say, okay, well, what did the ads for Japan Expo look like? What are those keywords, or what does that creative look like, as a way to guide whatever your plan is.
Yeah, and this is part of the creative part of doing this kind of work, is that it's not all rote, because you do need to like make those lateral, evaluate the data, but then draw those connections and make those lateral leaps in thinking to say, oh yeah, Japan Expo, anime, that's in Montreal, what neighborhoods in Montreal, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So thank you so much for this. It's been terrific to be able to pick your brain about all these topics. Very grateful for your time, as I'm sure my students will be. So
yeah,
thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that was great. I don't even have to do any editing, just the top and tails, and we can just stop recording now.